Hey YouTube, welcome back to my channel. Sorry it's been so long since my last video. Yeah, this past year has been crazy. What with me starting full-time work and then trying to balance that with the intense rehab that I signed myself up for, basically. Yeah, I actually had planned this video to be released, I think in August or something. But because of the lockdown and because of the restrictions imposed on us, couldn't really go anywhere unless you had a valid excuse, which is kind of hard if you're just, you just want to make a video of how you drive with a disability. I don't know if that would have flown, if that would have gotten accepted. So I had those plans, but it didn't work out. And then also it was conditional to the weather as well, because I wanted to obviously show some clips of how it worked during the different weather conditions because of the functions of the hand controller that I have. But I'm just going to give a quick backstory because I think it's necessary to provide context when introducing this product and give a bit of intro. Anyways, so when I was 16, that's when I got my learner license. Same as everyone else, you walk into Service New South Wales, do that test, and if you pass, you get your license. If you don't, try again next time.
Congratulations, mate. You failed.
What?
Thankfully, I was able to pass the first round. I can't remember if it was before that test in Service New South Wales or afterwards, but I had to do an additional OT assessment. So that was with an OT as well as a specialized driving instructor. So I was able to source the OT from my OT that I had at the time, but you just can't do any OT. It has to be like a specialized driving OT. So they referred me to this OT, and yeah, we were able to get in touch, get in contact and try to organize an assessment time. And it was through this OT, however, that I was able to get into contact with my driving instructor, because I had no idea at that time as to how I would be doing my hours, how I would be driving, what modifications I would possibly need.
Now, are you familiar with the gear shift?
You mean the Prindle?
The what?
So it was through this driving instructor and this whole experience that I was able to figure out what I needed, because this specific driving instructor actually specialized with disabilities. So his car had all different types of modifications attached to it. Yeah, basically through that assessment, I was able to figure out that I needed a hand controller, so an electronic steering knob. And it was through further conversations with this driving instructor that I was able to find a provider as well, which I'll go into in the next segment, so you can skip to that segment if you want to. However, because I was 16 when I got my learners, honestly, I was a bit more focused on my studies at the time, so I didn't see the need really to up my hours or go out there and get a car with the modifications, and also because I didn't have the finances for it. So that was put on the back burner until I was 21. 21 was about the age of when my learner license was going to expire, and so that really pushed me and gave me the motivation to try and up my hours. But I also had the finances available to be able to pay for driving lessons, pay for a car, and also pay for the modifications associated with it. With the driving lessons and the modifications, those were paid for by NDIS. For those of you that don't know, NDIS stands for National Disability Insurance Scheme, and so that is the Australian government's body which helps subsidize, basically pay for the costs associated with disabilities for people with disabilities. At 22 is when I got my provisional 1 license, so I was able to get my hours up through the driving lessons with that driving instructor, but also when my car and the modifications were ready, I was able to get my hours up through the normal avenue as well, where you get your parents to sit next to you.
Truman, I think I'm gonna throw up! Me too!
Supervise you as you drive. And then at 24 is when I got my green Ps, and then in this new year I will finally be able to transition into a full license. Now we actually go into what this video is about, and that is how I drive a car and the modifications associated with it. And so, like I said, my driving instructor at the time was able to show me the modifications that I needed that would enable me to be able to drive. When I was doing my research as to the providers who could provide such modifications, I narrowed down my options to two. So one of them was my driving instructor's pick, which was Hornsby PME Auto Conversions. Spoiler alert, I do end up going with them. But then my pick, it was solely like cost wise, because I was like, oh, this other provider might be good to go with them because it's providing the same service but you're getting it for cheaper kind of thing. But then when I discussed it with my driving instructor, he really recommended against going with them because of past negative experiences. And so I ended up trusting the recommendation of my driving instructor, as well as trusting the years of industry experience he's had dealing with these providers on behalf of other people with disabilities that are trying to get modifications as well. And so I went to Hornsby PME Auto Conversions, and that is where I was able to find the same product that I had been using on my lessons with my driving instructor, and so that is the Easyspin RF360. I'll put a link down below of PME Auto Conversions website to go through the buttons of the hand controller. The main two that you would probably be using are the ones at the top. Those are the indicators. So obviously at the top, the left is for the left indicator, the right is for the right indicator. And just as a side, all the buttons can be mapped to different functions. It can be customized to however your driving style is. And so the button next to the right indicator, for me, it's mapped to my windscreen wipers. And so in that, there's 3 different levels that PME Auto Conversions have placed on that button. So there's a low, medium and high speed. What I noticed though, having driven with this modification setup for the past 4 or 5 years, is that when it's really pouring, the highest speed that I have on my hand controller is just not enough. And so I would have to ask my passenger, well, basically whoever is sitting next to me, to assist me with the windscreen wipers on the normal way that you do it, basically, because I don't drive normally, so I don't know how to put it to its highest setting. I do now though, but still, it was a learning curve. I have been thinking actually to try and add that 4th highest speed onto my hand controller, but I just haven't gotten around to it. Moving on though, the left button next to the left indicator for me is mapped to my high beam. And it's really quirky in that when you press it once, it'll do that thing where it flashes, and then you have to hold it. I don't know how many seconds you have to hold it for, but you just have to hold it, and then it will keep the high beam on. And then when you press it, it'll turn it off. The big button on the left side is mapped to my car horn. And then there's another symmetrical button on the other side. But I don't have anything mapped to that. One issue that I did find with my hand controller is when you have to change the battery. So I've only ever opened the battery compartment twice in the time that I've had these car modifications. The first one was a bit after the modifications had happened, the buttons had suddenly stopped working, and I thought that was odd. I opened it, it was easy, it was fine, and then I just tried to, you know, do that thing where you remove the battery, put it back in again, try and troubleshoot it that way to see if you need to replace the battery. And then that did the job. I didn't need to replace the battery. The next time after that is where I had an issue. Just as a side note, you don't really need to change the batteries of the hand controllers often. It really depends on how frequently you use the hand controller in the car. But usually they say that you may have to change it every year or every 2 years. But yeah, the most recent time that I've changed the battery, we struggled to open the compartment of the battery door, and we found that the reason for that was because the battery had melted. And this is definitely user error on my part. I knew from when I got the modifications that you are meant to pack away the hand controller into somewhere where it won't be affected by the heat buildup inside the car. So I usually put it not in the glove box, but that compartment that is next to you when you're driving. I usually place it there, but I think I've left it out in the open one too many times. And I think when we tried to open the battery door, we may have affected one of the wires, because when I replaced the battery and then I drove again, it was really weird. It didn't work at all. And so I emailed PME Auto Conversions, and they were super friendly, and they still are. With whatever questions I have, they always answer in a really nice way and really promptly as well. I remember I emailed, I think, very late on a weekend, and then they answered me the next morning, and I was very shocked. I was like, oh, thank you so much for the customer service. So it didn't work the first time that I drove it after changing the battery. But then the second time I drove it, the buttons worked some of the time. Then the next time that I drove it, there was a higher hit rate of the buttons working. And then the next time it was fully working. And so I don't know if that's a battery thing or a wire thing, or like if we actually did touch one of the wires and it affected the remote. But to this day, I still have not gone back to PME Auto Conversions just because it's worked. There are 2 lessons that I've learned from this whole driving, this whole getting to drive process. And so the first one is just a personal finance thing. If you are in the same position I was early on, just buy a near new used car. Do not buy brand new. And I think I only realized this really recently because I'm getting into personal finance now, and you know, I'm trying to build up my savings, I'm trying to build up that emergency fund, I'm trying to pay down that debt, and so thankfully I have paid down this car debt, but that car
debt really for the past how many years
has limited my capacity to save and to be able to invest and that sort of thing. And number 2 is just to follow the instructions of the modification provider, i.e. don't leave your hand controller hanging on the steering wheel if you are not using it. Don't make the same mistake as me and have the battery melt on you and you won't be able to change the battery, sort of thing, and then it stresses you out. But yeah, don't do it. Apart from that, guys, I think this finishes up this video. Thank you so much for watching, and just a reminder that the link for PME Auto Conversions is down below. So if you are in New South Wales, have a disability but want to drive and need modifications on your vehicle, please hit them up because they are really good. Yeah, any other questions that you have in relation to that, you can comment down below and I'll try my best to answer them. Please like and subscribe. Thank you so much. Bye bye.